However, I will try my best uh, to get my message across. Gandhi hardly needs any kind of introduction to the students of India, people of India. Uh, as we all know that Gandhi's life was an epic life. Thousands of biographies have been written on Gandhiji. Both Indian writers and overseas writers have written on him. Uh, we have books like 10-volume books by Pyarelal, who has written on Gandhiji, and also Tendulkar has also written 8-volume books on Gandhiji. So not Sachin Tendulkar. Don't mistake him for Sachin Tendulkar. It is the other Tendulkar. D.G. Tendulkar. He has written 8 volumes on Gandhiji. So friends, if you can't afford, my student friends I am speaking to, if you can't afford the luxury to have a biography on Gandhiji, but I urge you to buy at least his autobiography. His autobiography is styled The Story of My Experiment with Truth. I believe this book has also been translated into almost all major Indian languages. Besides that, his writings also run into more than 100 volumes. His autobiography was serialized in Young India, and as a book form it was published in 2 volumes. First it was published in 1927 and afterwards it was published in 1929. But the original one was published in Gujarati, and it was priced at 1 rupee. The price of this book, 1 rupee, indicates Gandhian vision of economics too. When he started donation for the uplift of the Harijans, the untouchables across the country, he urged the people to donate 1 rupee coin. So when you know that when Gandhiji came from South Africa in 1915, he was a bit reluctant to spearhead the Congress, Indian National Congress. But once he joined the Indian National Congress, he slashed the membership fees of the Indian National Congress to only 4 annas. 4 annas means 25 paise. In order to include everyone in the Indian National Congress, he had to slash the membership fees. Earlier it was 1 rupee, so then he slashed it to only 25 paise. But that was way back in 1920. So we have had a marathon session on Gandhian economics today in SOA. But today we are going to chart a different terrain to understand the basic ideas that go into making Gandhian thoughts. So if my students, friends are watching, they are the major stakeholders of this webinar, and if they are watching this informal kind of talk, then I would just request them to watch 2 movies. One is Munna Bhai MBBS. The director is Hirani, Rajkumar Hirani, where the protagonist, Munna Bhai, he was something of a goon. But if you watch that movie, out of the blue, Gandhi appears and he motivates him. He reaches out to him. And he says, instead of practicing hatred, you have to practice love to win over others. So for the youth, this is a very engaging movie, very interesting movie. But after that, you should watch another movie. The title of the movie is Gandhi. and it has been directed by Attenborough. It's a very nice movie. It has lifted up many Oscar awards. It gives a very graphic detail of the epic struggle of Mahatma Gandhi. So that apart, if you want to have some idea about his life, we must read his autobiography. The title is very, very interesting. The title of the autobiography is The Story of My Experiment with Truth. I would like to underline these three words: experiment with truth. Gandhi used to say that my whole life is an open book. Anyone can read. Anyone can have access to my life. He was preaching the gospel of truth. The Gandhian concept of truth is very, very important. We need to understand that. If you read this book, the very first sentence says that the Gandhis belong to the Banya caste and seem to have been originally grocers. So he belonged to the Banya caste. And this is the first sentence of the autobiography. So, and then he goes on to give an account of his family. His grandfather was a Diwan of Kathiawar states. So he belongs to the western part of India, the western coastal belt of India. It was a very prosperous region. Kathiawar was a very prosperous region. There were the Gujarati Banyas, the Sindhi traders, and the Parsi traders. And moreover, the religious practice was more of tolerance, and he was born into a Vaishnava family. So, and his father, Karamchand Gandhi, was also the Diwan of Porbandar. So he ultimately, we know that Gandhi belonged to a very rich family. He did not belong to a poor family. And his father married 4 times. But not at the same time, please remember this. He lost his wife in succession. And Gandhi's mother, Mahatma Gandhi's mother, was the youngest one, the 4th one. Puthuli-bai was the 4th one. His mother was the last wife of Karamchand Gandhi. And Gandhi had 3 siblings, 1 older sister and 2 older brothers. Altogether, from his mother, there were 4. And from other mothers, there were 2, 4 and 2, 6 siblings. They were all together. This is what constituted Gandhi's family. And in that book, Gandhiji makes a very high note of his parents, that his father was a very, very courageous man. His father was a man of discipline, and his mother was a very devout lady. And he speaks about his mother. His mother was very spiritual woman. There was a Jain monk who used to visit Gandhi family, and his mother used to remain on fast for days together, especially during the rainy time, the Chaturmash. And she would not break her fast unless she saw the sun, no matter what happened to her health. That was the kind of piousness that Gandhi had learned from his mother. This fasting, we know that before launching any kind of movement or satyagraha, Gandhi used to go for fast. Before starting a strike, Gandhi used to go on fast. This fasting is what he has learned from his mother. And for Gandhi, this fasting is not an absence of consuming food. It has a spiritual dimension. And fasting, he drew spiritual sustenance from fasting. That is very important. So Gandhiji spent his childhood in Porbandar, and afterwards he went to Rajkot for his schooling. Those were the very different days. He married at the age of 13. And his wife, Kasturi Babai, was 6 months older than Gandhiji. And Gandhiji is very, very candid, is very truthful in his autobiography. When I read his autobiography, I am really surprised how could a man of his stature could mention all these things. He has written that he visited a prostitute in his youth. If Gandhiji had not mentioned all these things in his autobiography, we could not have known. So he had visited a prostitute in his youth, but he had to run away. That was Gandhiji. If you read that book, My Experiment with Truth, there is a chapter. There is a chapter in the book, My Father's Death and My Double Shame. When I was reading this morning this book, here stood on. So powerful the description is, and so candid he is. He has never ever compromised with truth. Gandhiji left no stone unturned to champion the cause of truth. That is why he said that God is truth. And in that chapter, My Father's Death and My Double Shame, he has written that he could not restrain from sexual indulgence. His wife, Kasturiba Bai, at the time was pregnant, he writes. And father was ill, bedridden completely, and he was on the deathbed. It was a night time. He was supposed to nurse his father, give a massage to his father. He was to sit by his father, but he could not because of the constant sexual preoccupation. So he had to run to his wife. So the title of that chapter is My Father's Death and My Double Shame. Though my wife was pregnant, but he had to go to his wife. So whatever, this is the background, this is the beginning. And he passed matriculation in 1887. So when he passed out in 1887, he was in a fix whether to do BA or to do what. But somehow in Bhavnagar there is a college, Samal Das College. He had already taken admission. And some family friend advised him that you are son of the Prime Minister of a state, Diwan of a state. So you should consider that the right thing to do is to step into the shoes of your father, follow the profession of your father. So instead of going for a BA, you have to go to England to earn a law degree. So finally, he made up his mind to go to England to study law. But the main obstacle was that his mother did not want him to go to England because she thought that if her son went there, he would be spoiled completely. So finally, what happened? He had to take 3 vows. The family guru, the family spiritual teacher, the Jain monk, he came, and then in front of him, in front of his mother, he took 3 vows. So that he would not touch wine, 1. He would not waste his time on any woman. He will not indulge in extramarital relationship. And the 3rd vow was that he would not eat meat. And Gandhi readily took the vow, and he kept the vow, and he went to England. And he went to England to join the inner temple. Gandhiji was staying in London city. If you read the book, he has written that I used to read newspapers like the Daily News, the Daily Telegraphs, the Pall Mall Gazettes. But in his autobiography, you do not get his keen observation of the city of London. He does not write much on the English culture. He does not write much on the English intellectual life. You do not get any kind of description in that book. But Gandhiji tries to become a true Englishman in England. He was wearing that suits and wearing shoes and tie and coat and that English hat, and he was trying his best to imitate the English gentleman. And after that he comes back to India, and the first case he took up in Bombay, that everybody knows that. But he got tired of it when he had to read the civil procedure code, evidence, civil procedure Code and Evidence Act. Then he got very tired of it. But whatever, the first legal case that he took up was a very small case. And he appeared in the Small Causes Court. The name of the court was Small Causes Court. In those days, the legal stars of Mumbai were the like of Firoz Mehta, Tyarji sir. They were the stalwart legal professionals in Bombay High Courts. So the first case that he appeared in the small court, he appeared for his defendant, and in the court he had to examine the plaintiff's witnesses. And Gandhi has written, the moment I stood up, my heart sank into my boot. He became utterly nervous. My head was reeling, and I thought that the whole court was also reeling. So he could not conduct the case and had to return it. And that was the end of his legal profession in India. A dejected, rejected, crestfallen, frustrated Gandhi comes back to Porbandar. He was a young man. And when he comes back to Porbandar, his older brothers, they all stood by him. He got a kind of, afterwards, a legal job in a firm called, in a firm in South Africa. And the job involved not much challenging tasks, but to draft legal notices and to draft correspondence for one firm. So he agreed to join the Dada Abdullah and company, and he went to South Africa. This is also, we all know that what happened in South Africa. One day what happened, if you have watched that movie, then you can very well recall Gandhi movie. If you have watched it, you can recall how one day he was going by train, and what happened on that fateful day, fateful night, Marisburg. The name of the town, the station, railway station was Marisburg. And from Marisburg to Petroika, he had to go by train. He had bought a first-class ticket, and the train reached the station at 9 p.m. Outside it was very, very cold, biting cold, because Marisburg is situated on a higher plateau, on a higher altitude. And when the train stopped on the station, a white passenger comes in. And the white passenger looks at Gandhi from top to down. And he thought a colored man is traveling with him. A black man, a colored man is traveling with him. So he could not stomach. He thought it to be an insult, so he could not stomach it. So he goes out and comes with two officials. One official said to Gandhi, you must come with us. And you must go to the van compartment. It's a general compartment. Nowadays we call it general compartment. Gandhi said that I have a first class ticket with me and I'm traveling on a first class ticket. I'm supposed to be traveling on this compartment. You cannot drive me out. You cannot just push me out. But the official retorted. The official said that does not matter. That hardly matters. Then Gandhiji refused to budge. And immediately police constables was called, and the police constables pushed him out with his luggage. The driver of the train blew the whistles, and the train ran away. Gandhi was alone that night on the platform. He was thinking whether to go back, just to tolerate all these things, or to fight for his right. And that very moment, he took the decision that I'm going to fight. And that is the turning point in the life of Mahatma Gandhi. That night on the railway platform of Marisburg, the Gandhi that we knew beforehand underwent complete change. And he came back and formed Natal Indian Congress. That is the beginning of his freedom struggle in South Africa. And during one travel also, his friend Henry Pollock had given him a book, a book written by John Ruskin. The title of the book is Unto the Last. And while he was traveling on the train from Johannesburg to Durban, he read it, the whole journey. He read the book, he finished the book. And in the book, he found three important principles which Gandhi nurtured and practiced his entire life. The first principle is that the good of the individual is contained in the good of all. That becomes his basic objective of life. And the second point is that all work should be valued and treated equally, regardless of what kind of work that we undertake or we are engaged in. All works should be treated equally. The labor of a farmer, or the 45-minute talk of a professor, or the doctor who is operating on a patient, they are all equal. So it gave him an insight to Gandhi. And all work should be valued. No work has to be devalued. And the third point is that life of a farmer and craftsman is the best life. And this touched him. The life of a farmer and craftsman is the best life. Therefore, please remember, when he comes back to India, the first engagement was to be with the farmers in Champaran. But when he came back to India in 1915, Gandhiji went on a train visit all over the country, all across the country. And the first time that he joined a struggle, that was in Champaran. The indigo growers, he went to be with the farmers. And after that, he went to Kheda to be with the farmers and laborers. Because Gandhiji understood the value of tilling. Gandhiji understood the value of plow, of cultivation, of the sweat and blood of the farmers and laborers. And he understood the ethical dimension of physical work. And in the grand project of Indian freedom struggle, Gandhiji prioritized this thing. And we need to understand the grammar of his movement. And then only we can get some ideas about Gandhian philosophy. And we know that Gandhi's contemporary were Mussolini, Gandhi's contemporary were Hitler, Gandhi's contemporary were Roosevelt, and all the great leaders of the world. But Gandhi, the kind of struggle that he launched was altogether different. He used non-violence as a weapon to take on the most powerful nation of the time. The British were confused because they could not know how to deal with it. They did not know how to deal with the passive resistance. And for Gandhi, this non-violence was not merely the absence of violence. Please let us understand this. But it has a spiritual force. It has a spiritual dimension. And Gandhi says non-violence leads to peace. And peace leads to truth. We cannot arrive at truth is not an abstract proposition, let us please. Truth is not a philosophical theorization. Peace is not an abstract entity. For Gandhi, truth is real and practicable. So unless we are in a complete state of non-violence, we cannot think of having peace. And unless we are at peace, we cannot experience the ultimate truth. That is the basic infrastructure of Gandhian philosophy. And before launching any movement or strike, he used to go on fast. It was just like when in the morning we get up and then we take a shower to wash away all our tiredness, all our, just to purge out all. For Gandhi, before launching any movement, before launching any struggle, he used to go on fast. It is not only a strategy to numb the physical aggression, please. And for him, fasting implied that one had to be spiritually prepared for the struggle. One has to be spiritually prepared for the struggle. And he injected that spirituality into the freedom struggle. And this dimension of spirituality is rooted in our civilizational ethos. And therefore Gandhiji did not hyphenate. He did not hyphenate religion and politics. And for Gandhi, religion is the religion with capital R. What does it mean? He compared religion with a luxuriant, huge tree. And all the branches of the trees, they are all religions, like Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism, Sikhism, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, Zoroastrianism. These are all the branches of a huge tree. And that huge tree for Gandhi was the religion. And therefore, before launching any kind of freedom struggle, he used to read the Gita. He used to ask his co-freedom fighters to read from the Quran and the Bible. He understood the universal appeal. He understood the universal message of all these holy books. And all this constituted for Gandhi the religion. So Gandhi taught the gospel of love and harmony. Not only that, he laid emphasis on what is lacking today in our situation, in our context today. We need to pay heed to Gandhi. Gandhiji laid emphasis on interfaith harmony. He did not believe in a fractured world in terms of religion, in terms of language, in terms of economic power, in terms of many things. He laid emphasis on interfaith harmony. And his vision of India was a pluralistic, inclusivistic India. And where does he get all these ideas from? He gets all these ideas from Vedanta. Vasudeva Kutumbakam. The entire globe is one family. So Gandhian thoughts transcends any narrow geographical boundary. So he praised mutual respect for each other's faith. And not only that, besides that also, the cardinal point of his thought was minimalistic life. Gandhiji led a very austere life. Though he himself belonged to a very rich family, but he led a very simple life. He used to say that the world has enough for our needs, but not for our greed. This one sentence speaks volume of his thoughts, Gandhian thoughts. He also laid emphasis on equality and social justice. Volumes have been written on equality and justice. Pseudo political leaders, they give their talkathon from the rooftop. But it was Gandhi who made it a cardinal point in his freedom struggle. Equality between man and woman, equality between all sections of the society. He was against untouchability. And therefore, wherever there was a mass gathering or wherever there was a meeting of Indian National Congress or for the whatever that, in two ashrams, one is in Ahmedabad, the other one is Maharashtra. He made it mandatory that there should be inter-community dining. He made it compulsory. We know that towards the end of independence, Gandhiji used to live in the Bhangi colony of Delhi. It was an example for many of the stalwart leaders of his time also. Even in South Africa, in Tolstoy farm, his wife refused to clean the toilets. But Gandhi became very adamant. He said, no, if you become the inmate of the ashram, you have to clean the toilet when your turn comes. That was Gandhiji. And at the same time, he was the embodiment of compassion and love. And the next, to my understanding, the next component of Gandhian thoughts is dialogic imagination. Gandhi was a very good listener to the people. He listened to the people. He was very compassionate towards his critics. We know that he edited many papers. Harijan, Young India, Indian Opinion, and in all these papers, whenever he got a letter criticizing his stand, he used to make space for that. And if you read the exchange of letters between Baba Sahib Ambedkar and Gandhi, Gandhiji gave space to Ambedkar in his papers. So Gandhiji believed in that dialogic imagination. That is also a kind of mutual respect. And in his epic struggle of India's freedom movement, he created space for women. It was Gandhi who brought women into politics. His freedom struggle was hospitable to women. When I read his autobiography, I see that, and also he used to call his wife Ba. Ba means mother. He used to call Kasturibai Bai mother. And Gandhi's concept of woman was always coined in one term, Sita. He used to call the woman Sita, not the Puranic Sita, but the symbolic Sita. We know that the Sita of Puran is also a very pious lady and very self-sacrificing. So he used to call Indian, not only Indian, all women Sita. It may be out of relevance to make this point, but I must make mention of it. Gandhiji, when his wife became pregnant and the time for delivery came, Gandhiji midwifed his wife's delivery. The next point of Gandhian thoughts is rationalism. And friends, science plus Gandhi will save the world. Earlier, in the first phase of his struggle, Gandhi used to say that God is truth. But towards the end of life, he said that having struggled for freedom of this nation, having championed the cause of the downtrodden and the untouchable, having fought against all sorts of inhumanities, I have to come to understand that God is not truth, but it is the other way around. Truth truth is God. That is the basic premise of Gandhian philosophy. And he talked of humanistic globalization. His socialism, Gandhian socialism, was altogether different from Marxist socialism, and not only different but diametrically opposite to Marxist socialism. Gandhi believed in the self-reliance of a village, self-reliance of a panchayat, self-reliance of a jilla. But at the same time, he also believed in the interconnectedness of all these small units that go into making the nation. So he talked of humanistic globalization. He talked of Swadeshi, that one should take pride in one's own product. He added value to the homegrown products. And therefore he himself not only he moved the charkha, but also he asked all his freedom fighters, co-freedom fighters, everybody, to spin the wheel. Now, what was the concept of education according to, what was his concept of education? Now, his concept of education is very interesting. Gandhiji talked of a synthesis of the education of the heart, of the hand, and of the head. And therefore, he himself had founded one educational institute, Gujarat Vidyapit, of which he himself was the chancellor. If you have ever been to that place today also, the inmates, the students, the professors, the vice chancellors, they all practice that. You have to produce your own clothes. Early in the morning, you have to cleanse. Now we talk of this Swachhata Abhijan. But I had the opportunity of staying in that Gujarat Vidyapit for 4 or 5 days. And one of my friends, quite early in the morning, around 5:30, came and knocked on the door. And I got out of the room, and then he told me it is time to go out and clean the entire campus. And to my utter surprise, I found all the teachers, all the professors, all students, right from the lowest worker to the highest authority, the vice chancellor, they were all enjoying cleaning the campus. Gandhiji spoke of Naya Talim in education, the new education, the education that will have a perfect blend and synthesis of the education of the hand, the education of the heart, compassion and love, and concern towards those who are on the border of society, on the margin of the society, and the education of the head, of the conscience. And that was his idea of education. And also he spoke of Sarvodaya. Sarvodaya means well-being for all. Well-being for all. Not one individual has to be left out in the society. Gandhiji therefore spoke of Gram Swaraj. One unit of the society, one unit of the nation, that is Gram or village, has to be self-reliant. The people will all come together and decide their collective fate. We know that Gandhiji, way back, exactly I don't remember the date and the year, but he had written that I would live for 125 years. If Nathuram Godse had not killed Gandhiji, Gandhiji would have lived up to 1994. But unfortunately, Godse killed him. And Godse was not a human being. Godse was a sinister philosophy personified. Godse represented a philosopher, very, very sinister philosopher, life negating philosophy, dehumanizing philosophy he represented. So friends, we know right from Nelson Mandela to Ian Suki to Barack Obama, from Anna Hazare to Martin Luther King, all the great people, they have emulated Gandhi. Gandhi is more relevant today than he was. When we see all around the kind of situation that is prevailing all across the country, all across the world, Gandhiji becomes more relevant. Gandhiji becomes more inevitable in our grand project of nation building. That Gandhiji laid emphasis on a very pluralistic, inclusivistic nation. He put emphasis on active empowerment of the women. He laid emphasis on Gram Swaraj, on new education, Naya Talim, the education of the head and heart and mind. Gandhiji preached and practiced non-violence. And that is why Gandhiji is more relevant today. Coming back to the conclusion, my dear friends, let me tell you that Rajkumar Hirani, he has used that word, very important word in that movie, Gandhigiri. Unless we do Gandhigiri, we cannot save this world. Thank you very much for this patient hearing. Thank you, Nachiketa sir, Tipti ma'am.
Professor Samuel, for your great deliberations on Gandhian thoughts. Actually, we had, I remember, we had called Mr. Satyanarayan Sahu, the former press secretary.